Okay, let's make a start, inshallah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani wa yafqahu qawli. Rabbi zidni ilma, Rabbi zidni ilma, Rabbi zidni ilma. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, dear attendees, and welcome back to our second episode of Imaan after Ramadan. This is a 6-week series post Ramadan, where we talk about various aspects of how we can character build our development and our spiritual development as well. Last week, we had our introduction about how to maintain the bounties of Ramadan after Ramadan. And Jazakallah khair for everyone who participated in that. It was a very, very interesting session where we had a lot of insight to how we can build habits, how we should maintain our schedules and routine, and how it's important to take one thing that we did in Ramadan and continue it. Remember, consistency. This week, inshallah, we have Dr. Riza Muhammad from Manchester joining us, mashallah. He's going to be talking to us about Barakah. And from your screens, you can see that it means divine goodness. Before I introduce Dr. Riza Muhammad to start, inshallah, I'll give you a little bit of background about him. Mashallah, his bio is amazing there, mashallah. I think I'll be here for a good 5 minutes if I sat and read everything. But just on a brief note, Dr. Rizal Muhammad is an orthopedic and trauma surgeon by profession, but he's also a tutor, examiner, clinical and educational supervisor of medical students at the University of Liverpool. He's lectured extensively on the subject of spiritual and self-development over about the past 3 decades. He has also served as the Director of Education and Training for the Islamic Society of Britain between 2000 and 2006, as well as the Educational Director of Al Trinsham Masjid Muslim Association from 2006 to 2012. He currently resides in Manchester, where he is involved with youth and community work. He is an executive committee member of the European Academy of Quranic Studies, where he regularly organizes and conducts educational seminars at the British Muslim Heritage Centre. He's also a trustee of the Islamic Foundation in the UK. He's also the director of the Caribbean Muslim Network, a non-governmental organization that engages Muslim organizations and academia in the Caribbean islands and countries to facilitate information sharing, education and training, collaboration and research of affairs relevant to Muslims, and public policy engagement on issues affecting Muslims. MashaAllah, such a detail. There was more, MashaAllah, there was so much more. But due to time, inshallah, Dr. Riza, inshallah, will give us so much more insight to himself, inshallah, during his session. And we're really, really looking forward to listening to what he has to say. I'm sure there's going to be so much that we can take from it, inshallah. So Dr. Riza, I'm going to unmute you. Hello, assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam.
Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you well. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, I think everyone can hear you. That's fine. Dr. Riza, mashallah, the stage is yours, inshallah.
Okay. Jazakallah for that introduction. And it's my pleasure to be here earlier. I just want to thank the sisters for having me here to discuss what I consider to be a very important topic. And I would just like to congratulate you on this series that you have organized on Imaan after Ramadan. It's a wonderful series, and it's really something that we need to be able to boost our Imaan and to be able to ensure that whatever we have benefited from in the month of Ramadan continues way beyond, inshallah. So today, inshallah, we'll be looking at this topic of Barakah, which I've noted there as divine guidance. So if you look carefully at this slide, what you would note is that there is somebody who is undertaking to be able to plan something. And I suppose, in a sense, when we think about Barakah, maybe that depicts what we are talking about, is that the effort that is taken to be able to plant and to be able to nurture and to be able, to ensure that the plant gets everything that is needed for it to be able to grow and to develop, and then hopefully to be able to bear fruit, is something which we are talking about when we talk about and use the term Barakah, in the sense that what is it that really makes us stick, what it is that can give us that extra bit that perhaps others may not have. So that comes down to the definition of exactly what do we mean when we use the term barakah. What does barakah really mean? Often we would use the term blessing, that barakah means blessing, and that's probably a good translation of it. But really, what is blessing? Does what does it connote? And I've looked at several definitions of the word barakah, and I think this is one which I felt perhaps reflects a lot of what we want to discuss today, inshallah. And that is that barakah is an attachment of divine goodness to a thing. So if it occurs in something little, it increases it. And if it occurs in something much, it benefits it. And the greatest fruits of barakah is in all things is to use that barakah in the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I think this definition of barakah really helps us to put into perspective what we're talking about. And what we're saying is that really when we talk about barakah, to be able to get that extra bit that we're asking for, that we need in whatever endeavor that we undertake, is something that is not coming from us, but it is coming from a divine source. And it is coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in turn is the one who will increase it and give it even more value, both in this world and in the next world. And if it is that it occurs, then it brings much benefit. And the last thing that anybody would want to do is to be able to undertake an endeavor such that it comes to naught, that all of the effort and hard work, there is very little reward that comes from it. So the last point about the greatest fruits of barakah in all things is the use that barakah in the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala suggests to us that whatever it is that we do, it must be in alignment with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants. So we might want to do something, but it's also about the way in which it is done. It could be that we started off trying to do something which we consider to be worthwhile, which we consider to be of benefit to others. But in the process of doing that, then we go off course, we lose focus, we lose sight, our motive becomes polluted in a sense. And then, we don't achieve what we want to be able to achieve, or perhaps we achieve it. But in doing so, because of the way in which it was done, then we may have lost all divine blessings from it. So we'll come back to that, inshallah. I'm going to leave enough time for questions and answers at the end, because I think this is something that everybody knows a little bit about, and we would all want to say something about it, inshallah. The next thing I want us to draw attention to is, I think some of you may be familiar with this diagram. It's called the Pareto principle. And it's a very well-known principle in business and in the professional world. And what this tells you is that really, even though all time might be equal, but the time that you do in doing particular things, or the effort that you put in doing particular things, when it comes to your work or when it comes to any endeavor that you undertake, what you will find, there are some things that brings even more results. So as a rule of thumb, if you were to divide things into fives, 1/5 of the time that you spend, really can bring 80% of the results. And the other 80% of time that you spend on things only bring 20% of results. So if you were to translate this into something which can be of benefit to you, you can say, well, for instance, when it comes to prioritization, if I were to do this thing, if I only had X amount of time available to me, what is the one thing, or what are the couple of things which I can do in that time which will bring maximum benefit? So then you analyze everything that you wanted to get done, and then you look at how you can use your time, and then you prioritize what you're doing. And we're gonna see that inshallah, as more when we think about things that brings us benefit, not just in this world, but also in the next world. But bear in mind this Pareto principle of 80% of the time expended only results in 20% of the results. So if I were to give you a simple example, let's say, for instance, if you have a business, it could be that you may say, well, look, to be able to get the maximum benefit or from the business, I'll keep the business open 12 hours per day. But then that means hiring somebody for 12 hours. And so then it means you're having to pay somebody, having to make sure that everything's in place for 12 hours. But then if you were to analyze the 12 hours and realize, well, hold on, the busiest time of my business is between, let's say, 3 o'clock in the afternoon and 7 o'clock in the evening, and the rest of the time, and after maybe after 7 o'clock, there's hardly any customers, and before 9 o'clock, there is no one there. Then you might decide, well, look, you know what? I'm going to just open my business between, let's say, 10 o'clock and 7 o'clock or something like that. And so, in other words, you want to choose a time when you're going to get the maximum benefit. It's like, now all of us are on our smartphones, and all of us are sending messages and emails and using different types of technology. But then if you think about the usage of your technology, you want to be able to use the technology and to reach out to people, especially in marketing, when it is that you can get the most results of what you do. So if you send an email out and then realize that people are not looking at the email, it could be that you've sent the email at the wrong time. You haven't sent the email when people are it's the first email on the Outlook, and that's the email that will come up when it is that they open their account. So those are some of the things to bear in mind. Now, what are some of the sources of barakah? I mean, how do we get some of that divine goodness as such in all of the different things that we do? And the very first one I've put here is this term niyyah. And very often when we think about what niyyah means, the translation comes up as being an intention. But I believe that niyyah is much more than intention. Niyyah is probably more so we can consider it to be your motive. And niyyah is also linked with your goals and with your vision that you have. What are the objectives that you're setting out? All of that is linked with your niyyah. And niyyah is also linked with your modus operandi. It means that how it is that you're going to deliver or get done what it is that you've set out to do. So it could be that you've made your niyyah before you decided to pray. That you've made your niyyah that you want to pray. And so you've made your niyyah. So you know what you've set out to do, that you want to be able to accomplish your prayer. But sometimes when we think about niyyah, we just simply think about this is what niyyah is equivalent to what I'm going to do. But I think it's a lot more than that. So even if you were to draw the example of prayer, we can say that we can link the idea of niyyah now as being a motive, that what I want to get out of the prayer is the maximum possible reward out of that. What I want to get out of it, if prayer is a means by which I can communicate and I can draw closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then therefore, how can I begin to achieve that by the end of the prayer? As I get into it, but by the end, so that I am in a different state and I am certainly much closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So as you make your niyyah and as you're sort of thinking to your mind, this is what I want, what the niyyah is prompting you to do is to be able to ask yourself certain questions. So if I want to get that done, how am I going to do it? So you can simply say, well, I'll just get up and pray. But that might be one way, but then you really haven't planned. And if you don't plan, then you may well fail in terms of what you've set out to do. And it could be that you decided, well, look, what are the things that I really want to be able to focus on in my prayer? Is it that my focus and my concentration? Is it that I am reciting things which I don't really understand? Is it that I am more focused on what is to come after the prayer in some activity that I'm doing? I might be hungry, or there is work, or I have to do something else. Is that what it is? Is it just that a tick box exercise that I know that I must pray. If I don't pray, then I will be suffer the consequences by from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of judgment, and therefore I must pray. So all of these things come into into play. And this is why whenever it comes to prayer, I often say that when you think about prayer, prayer is not just simply, if you think about prayer as only as an obligation, then you have just about scratched the surface of understanding what prayer is about. Prayer is about earning and that love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And prayer is something which is something, it is a privilege self to become closer to Him. And whenever we think about our prayer and about our salah or about our namaz, the thing we should always focus upon is how Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam received the prayer, how he received the namaz. He received it, he went up to the highest heavens, he became close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is the measure of that gift that was given to us. And therefore, as an example, when it comes to niyyah is simply much more than just your intent. But what niyyah does more than anything else, niyyah helps us to keep that sense of focus and to know that whatever it is that we're doing it for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We do it exclusively for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even if it be against ourselves, even if it, in the end result, even if we might have to suffer, then but we do it exclusively for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, knowing that even though that we might fail sometimes in terms of what we set out to do, but the reward lies with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The next thing about niyyah, as I have mentioned there on the slide, is that of the idea of sincere motives. See, sincere motives is important because you can do things and the rest of and everybody else around you, when they think about what you're doing, they believe that what you're doing is something which is sincere. They can only judge you by what is being done, what they can see in front of them. And what they might be seeing in front of them is something which is good. You know, so a beautiful activity has been organized. This person is very much indulged in dawah. And I remember an incident, that one of our teachers told us about many years ago. He said that, there was he gave us an example of a group of brothers who were studying in a mosque. So they had a halaqah and they were studying in the mosque. And then someone came into the mosque and they started to pray. And as they started to pray, the person who was leading the session, was looking at the person who was praying. And he seemed to be so focused and so attentive and so much demonstrating so much khushu in the manner in which his prayer was being done, that he began to reflect on this with those who were in his circle. And at that point in time, the person who was praying, he turned around and said, "You know what? I'm also fasting as well." So this tells us, something. This tells us something about sometimes, we might be doing things, and because of the presence of others, our motives might become corrupted in a sense. So it's something for us to bear in mind, and we can talk about it more at the end, inshallah. The next one I want to talk about as a source of divine goodness is that of dua, of supplication. See, very often what we do as human beings is that we tend to rely upon ourselves to get things done. We feel as though that there is no need to call upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The food is in front of us. Why should I call upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? I have a trustworthy car. It's the latest model. It's everybody's envious about it. It must be able to get me to my destination. I have a beautiful house. I have a beautiful job, and therefore this sense of complacency of what we have, makes us feel as though that we don't need to call upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or we don't need to be able to get more out of what it is that we're doing. And this is where, when we turn to Allah, see, when you think about what dua is not merely a supplication. It's not merely a supplication. I often say that dua is, in a sense, represents, it's like a snapshot of your ambitions and of your goals in life. That's what dua is. It sort of lays out for you your day. It sort of lays out for you your day so that you begin to connect your life in this world with the life in the next world. And you begin to see how your life in this world can become a means to be able to attain what you want in the next world. And for every single thing that you do, that you are calling upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless it, to be able to provide guidance for you, to be able to, and knowing well that in whatever it is that you do, as much as you will strive your best to ensure that it is done to perfection, that you will err, that you will make mistakes, that that your motives might become corrupted, and therefore you need to continuously turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to seek His mercy and to seek His forgiveness. And these two things are important because the two things that we all need to be able to gain paradise, or to be able to gain, entry into the Allah, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has provided for those who are successful in the next world, is that of His maghfirah and that of His rahmah, His forgiveness and His mercy. So dua is something important. And when you make dua before something, or when you make dua after something, then you realign what it is that you're doing, trying to remind yourself that you're doing it for Allah, and that whatever good that comes from it comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or whatever it is, whatever faults are there, that perhaps it has come from yourself. The next one is that of shukr. One of the things about the things that we do, whenever we organize even sometimes Islamic events, is very, very often we forget this idea of being thankful. We think about the activity, we think about what has been accomplished, but we don't think about the people perhaps who may have been part of the team that has organized an event. We don't think about those who have come to the event. We don't think about how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has provided us with all of the necessary conditions to be able to ensure that what we set out to do was successful. So these things are important, and often we tend to focus upon the negative things. If only we could have done that, and if only we could have done something else, then it would have been so much better, which is important. But the very first thing that you should do whenever something happens is to become reflective upon the good that is there. There is always goodness. And even if something happens to each one of us, there is goodness in it. If there is something that brings good to us, then we can sense what it is, and we can benefit from it. But even if it seems to be something that is going against us, that is something that is being some sort of an obstacle or some sort of a difficulty, then there is always also goodness in it. It becomes an opportunity for us to be able to turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to go back towards Him. And that again is something, and that it could be that perhaps we had just about begun to become a little bit neglectful of Him, and by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sometimes withdrawing something that He gives us on a regular basis. It gives us an opportunity or a reminder for us to be able to turn towards Him and to go back to Him, inshallah. So think about it. And the Quran tells that if it is that you are grateful and if it is that you are thankful, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will continue to give you even more. Even more Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you. So remember that one. The next one I've put there is that of charity. And in a hadith Qudsi, Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said that, O son of Adam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, O son of Adam, spend in charity and I'll spend on you. And that's important. Very often when we think about giving away in sadaqah, in charity, giving to others, we think about um, what we possess is being decreased, is being diminished in some way or some form. And that's why very often, the people who find it more 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 difficult to give away are the people who are rich. You might think that if somebody is poor and somebody hardly has anything with them, that because of their their scarce the sparsity of funds, that you might think that they are the ones who will will find it difficult to give. But unfortunately, the opposite is true. The opposite is true. It is those people who have more, you know, they are the ones who find even more difficult to give. And this is so amazing. Very often when I look at communities, and I look at places where sometimes the where massages are built, even here in the UK, and I look at even some of the largest mosques which are there. One of the things which I have noted is that the places where you would find the most mosques where they're best maintained, that people care about them, they're very, very particular, are sometimes in the poorest communities, where you would think that people just don't have enough, that they're struggling, that perhaps they live in council houses, or perhaps they don't have the type of jobs that others have. But when you look, but when you turn now to some of the more affluent communities, you see sometimes how they're struggling. I don't know. I mean, this may be just my observation, but this is something I've noted. And but it is often said that the people who have more are the ones sometimes who find it even more difficult to give, because seemingly to them that they're losing a portion of what it is that they have. They can sense the amount, which might be large, but then again, when it comes to as a proportion of their total finance, it might be small. The other thing about sadaqah is that what sadaqah does is that sadaqah helps to cleanse us from our sins and adds to our good deeds. And this is an important source of barakah. And that's important. When we do something, even when we do something which is wrong, one of the first things that we should try and do in terms of trying to make amends for it is to give something away in charity. Even sometimes, we don't pray in time. Take something and give it away in charity. Give it to a charitable cause. And once we start giving more charity, it will help us to be able to help alleviate our sins, inshallah. The next one I've put there is something which is, I think, is probably one of the key ones that we ought to take note of, and that is trying to maintain good relationships. How often do we organize things and we're so focused on what we need to get done, and in the course of doing what we need to get done, we engage in so much conflict with others, such that by the end of the event, we have said things about people, we have behaved with them in perhaps in ways that we wouldn't normally behave, because of maybe the situation was very stressful, the activity required and placed a great burden upon us, whatever it is. And these things do happen. But one of the things that we have to try and do as much as we can is, whatever it is that we do, we need to be able to maintain good relationships. And especially as all of us, we are working in teams, we are working in organizations. Many of you are working as part of the UK Islamic mission, and with the sisters and with the brothers and with others. And therefore, one of the key things is to be able to not just to be able to focus upon the faults of others, but excuse our brothers and sisters and try and maintain good relationships, inshallah. But we'll come back to that. I'm sure some of you might have things to add to that. The next one I have here is the idea of trying to wake up early. And I don't have all of my slides on this, but one of the things that you would note, and I've done some studies on this, which is that the people who are successful in this world, many of the most successful people in this world, one of the things that they all have in common is that they all get up very early in the morning. When others are asleep, when others are comfortably tucked in, they are up very early in the morning and they start the day early. And there is great barakah and there is great blessings in this. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has told us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah made the early hours blessed for my ummah. You see, there is time, but they also more, but not all time is equal in a sense when it comes to the whole idea of barakah, when it comes to the whole idea of what it is that you might be able to gain from the course of any 24 hours. For instance, we think about a particular day. We think about the time, the time of Fajr and the time of Asr. These are the times when the angels are in transition. We have angels on our shoulders who are recording our deeds. But this is when they are going to change shifts with other angels. And that's important for us to be able to remember, because what you want to be able to do is to be able to be doing something such that when they return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah asks them, what it is now, how did you leave my servant? And then they can reply that, yeah, Allah, I left my servant, and then they were in some form of product activity, they were serving you, they were in ibadah, they were in dhikr. So it's important. So and we even see the notion of time when it comes to what we just came out of. We came out of the month of Ramadan. And this is part of the whole idea that of what we describe as the sunnah of Allah, or the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. See, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sunnah. Not everything is equal. So not all months are equal, because we know that some months give us more rewards than other months. We know the month of Ramadan, there's far more barakah in a sense than other months of the year, and so too with time, and so too with days of the week. Friday gives you far more barakah than other times, and so too during the course of the day. And not only at times of Fajr and Asr when the angels are in transition, but also in the very early period of the morning to be able to get up. You find that you will be able to focus. And even for those of you who are writing exams, or for those of you who have work and who have projects and what have you, what you would often find is that if it is that you were to wake up early in the morning, that somehow you feel fresh, you feel energized, and you're able to do things. And that's something for us to think about. So I'm going to leave it there at that one, inshallah. The next one is that of asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness. And this is linked with the last one which I mentioned, the one about dua. In that the more forgiveness that we can ask for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the more that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give us. And if anyone continuously asks, the hadith says that if anyone continuously asks forgiveness from Allah, Allah will appoint for him a way out of every distress, and a relief from every anxiety, and will provide for him from where he did not reckon. Now, one of the things for some of you who might be looking and they say, will appoint for him and will provide for him. Remember, one of the things to take note of, that whenever the Quran or the Hadith, the masculine term, it doesn't mean masculine. It doesn't mean male only. It means male and female. So one of the beautiful things about the Quran is that the Quran not only addresses male and female as one entity, when it speaks in the Quran, but also it addresses male and female, and then it specifically addresses female as well. So mashallah. So this is really this is really amazing how the Quran addresses the females in the Quran. So seeking the forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is something which is important. The next one I want to draw your attention to, that is that a lot of us are in employment, a lot of us do things, a lot of us, it could be that we are in employment, or perhaps there are others in our household who are the primary breadwinners in the household. But it is really important that we look carefully at the source of what we are using. The source. Oh Allah, oh people, Allah is good, and He therefore accepts only that which is good. You don't want to turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and give something to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala which is corrupted. which is mixed with other things. You want to be able to ensure as far as you can and as much as you can that whatever it is that you present to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or whatever it is that you do, that the source of your income and the source of all of your endeavors is something which is good. And that is something which is important, because we live in times when it is very easy to be able to get some of our income from sources which we might doubt whether or not it is really halal or not. And therefore, and sometimes we tend to sort of, you know, sort of create a sort of a split personality and within our own minds. And to give an example of this, I remember I live in a very remote part of the UK at one time, many years ago. And in that village, in that place which I lived, there were only a handful of Muslims. In fact, there was only one main Muslim family. And I so happened to come across that family, and I met them, and then they invited me to come by them, and which I did. And the person who was in charge of the family, he was somebody who was very learned in Islam. He had studied in a religious institution. He knew a lot. In fact, he even offered to take me to Salah and to introduce me to other Muslim people who lived in the city as such. But one of the striking things which I saw when I went into their home is that in that community there was only one corner shop that sold alcohol, and his was the only one. So therefore, as much as he was careful, and even when we left, by the time we left his home, he said, "This is halal meat. I'll get all the halal meat for you." And different things. So the focus was on so many of the important things, that in terms of the type of food that we consume personally. But when it came to the idea of earning an income from something which was clearly, something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not like, he could not appreciate that sense. I didn't say anything about it, but yet he could not appreciate, after all of this extensive, knowledge and training that he had in an Islamic institution, that there was a disconnect between his employment and between his source of income and the life that he was living. And I'll give you one other example, which I found to be quite astonishing. This is where I was in the midst of a meeting and discussing something really important in terms of a dawah activity. And then the conversation went on to how it is that employers should treat employees. So the person who was in charge of the dawah activity, he said that the way that you need to treat employees to get the most out of them is you have to show who is boss. And therefore, if it means that you have to use obscene language at them, you have to shout at them, you have to say, this is what I do, and I get the best out of my workers. I need to show them who is the boss, and that is why my business is so efficient. So this is the main man who is funding this activity, but this is the way that he's treating his workers. So there's a disconnect. Can you see there's a disconnect between his work in one sense and his dawah on the other? So I'm gonna leave it there at that, inshallah, and I'm gonna sort of open the floor now for questions and comments, inshallah. I'm just gonna go back to the.
Jazakallah khair, Dr. Rizal, sorry. Like you suggested, inshallah, we'll open the floor to questions and answers, inshallah. So if there are any questions, you may either raise your hand or also have the questions box open, the question pane. So you may type your question or you may raise your hand and I can unmute you, inshallah. Please take good opportunity of this to ask any questions that you may have. There are lots of things here that Dr. Rizal has touched upon about working in organizations or even in our personal lives as well. So I'm sure that there might be things that you'd like to ask. Please don't feel shy. We'll just wait for anyone to have any questions.
Please feel free to comment as well. I'm sure that there are things that you might want to see and add to this topic, inshallah.
Okay, nothing yet. So Sister Shazi Jamil has said, Jazakallah khair. So many things to take in and implement on, inshallah. Jazakallah khair.
While the sisters are thinking, there are some. Oh yes, okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, there is a sister with her hand up. Let me just unmute her. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Azra. You can unmute yourself.
Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi barakatuh.
Alaikum
Beautiful,
assalam.
description of Barakah. Alhamdulillah, brother. I really thoroughly enjoyed your session, the whole hour session, nearly an hour session, mashallah. And I just would like to add upon a small point which just clicked to my mind was about eating together. So there's a beautiful hadith related to it as well. So that gather together to eat your food and saying Bismillah, and you will be blessed in it because Barakah is in the group, isn't it? So really, I just wanted to, it's a small thing which I just wanted to add it on, saying that, because we have forgotten to eat together, especially in so much of the time is, we are all in a rush time and we don't have time of getting together and sitting together and eating together. And so much is this barakah in just a small act. And then, alhamdulillah, so as a group or as an organization or anything we do together, there's so much of barakah in it. I just want to add that small thing in it. Alhamdulillah, your session was amazing and thoroughly enjoyed every bit of it. Jazakallah khairan kathiran.
Well, sister, I think the point you made is a really, really important one, and it's something which is easily forgotten, and it's even more forgotten now because the time that we live, we live in a time when people work in different hours within the household. So you might find that um, the children are in school at particular hours. Maybe the father might be working and has a different timetable, and so everybody is working at different times. One of the things is that people don't get an opportunity to eat together. And more so, what happens that even when they do get an opportunity to eat together, it could be like on a weekend. What tends to happen is that everybody seems to want to get up at a different time, or even if it's in the evening, you find that this person wants to look at a movie, this person feels that they have homework to do, that person is on their social media, this person wants to look at television. So everybody seems to have something else to do or to want to be interface while they're having their meal. So that sense of bringing where meals is really represents an opportunity for families to come together is something which is missed, and the opportunity for barakah which comes with the food, is lost.
Jazakallah khair. There's another question that's from the questions pane is something along the lines of maintaining good relationships and forgiving. Does this imply that you forget and don't stand for any misdoings? That's a question.
So repeat that question again.
Yeah, of course I can. Maintaining good relationships and forgiving. Does this imply that you forget and don't stand for any misdoings?
No, I think I don't think it's a question of don't stand for any misdoings, but what happens is that there is a way in which sometimes you can correct someone or you can draw to the attention what they might be doing may not be the right thing. Now, what happens very often, what tends to happen is that, and this happens in the home, if you see somebody doing something which you don't like or which you think is maybe not a good habit to have, we, as soon as we see them doing that, we tell them off. And even if they do it 5 times in 5 minutes, we tell them off 5 times. And if it is that do it, 25 times, they would tell them off 25 times. And it seems that every time we do that, they seem to be repeating it again, and it seems to be creating even more. And it's our advice is not getting through. And this is something which I see happening over and over again. And the reason for that is that there is a time and a place and a way and a manner in which advice should be given. And therefore, it could be that when you're saying what you're saying, that you might be saying when others are wrong, and it becomes like a form of ridicule, that you're trying to say that what I'm doing is not the right thing, or you're trying to belittle me in some way. And this may not be the case, that you might be, innocently trying to correct that person. So you have to think about what is the best way. It could be that you've seen something that needs to be corrected, but are you the best person to make that observation and to draw it to that person's attention? So what I'm saying is that it's not necessary, and it could be that there are things which you might believe that needs to be corrected, but are they the most important things that needs to be corrected or that needs to be addressed at that particular time? Are there things which are far more important? And could you, in a sense, delay? And could it be that that person might come to their own sense of realization in time that what they're doing is not the best thing? So maintaining relations is important, because if the very first thing that you do is to be able to antagonize someone when you're trying to correct them, then you've lost all hope or opportunity to be able to ensure that advice that you're giving will become meaningful and will be filled with barakah. So there's a lot more science and a lot more art to the way that we should address that, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair. There was a hand up, but the hand is now down. So I think let me see if I can find them. No, I think let's just move on to the next question, inshallah. Let me see. Okay, so there's one question here that says, I'm starting to practice inshallah and praying my salah and making time. I'm ashamed to say I did used to get lazy, but I'm doing my best and doing my salah and spending more time practicing. I wanted to ask, what more can I do to help me and improve? So I reckon something along the lines of barakah, I believe. So how can you bring barakah in the rituals of Islam that we are doing?
I think the one, the thing about the prayer, I believe that one of the most important things about prayer is what I often call a change in mindset about prayer. And what I mean by that is that very often when people think about prayer, they think about prayer as simply, as I mentioned before, simply as an obligation that they ought to do. An obligation, and that obligation in turn becomes something which they consider to be burdensome, something which they have to put out a lot of extra effort to do. If you were to change the way that you think about prayer, instead of it being an obligation, and though it is, and I'm not denying it's not an obligation, but knowing that there is something else about the prayer, and that is the next level up beyond obligation, is that of the prayer being a right. I have a right to pray, and no one in this world, or no one is going to prevent me from that right. If I told you that you were losing a right, the right to vote or the right to do something else, then you would be up in arms with me. You'll be saying that how dare you take away a right, which is a God-given right, or which you can't do it. You can't take it away from me, and you would feel that you have lost something. Now, if you were to think about every time a time for prayer comes about, it's almost as if that Allah is, Allah is a right. Allah has given you that right, that opportunity, the means by which to be able to pray. It could be that It could be that others did not live enough to be able to experience that time when they could have prayed, but Allah gave you that right. Then you begin to see that there is a change in the way that you're thinking about it. Fulfillment of rights is something which you would much easier do than fulfillment of a mere obligation. That is the second level. The third level is that, as I mentioned before, is that of it being not just a right, but it being a privilege. I have a right, but now I'm been given a privilege by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to connect with Him, to have an audience with Him, to be able to communicate with Him, to be able to interface with Him, to be able to have a one-on-one discussion with Him, to be able to pour out all of my concerns and my distresses and anxieties with Him, to be able to ask Him for the things that I truly need in this world and in the next world. That is a privilege. And if you think about it as a privilege, then instead of running away from the prayer, instead of thinking, gosh, it's prayer time again, you'll be thinking, when is the next prayer time? When is the next opportunity for me to begin to engage in the prayer? I believe that once you start this process of changing your mindset, then you will find that everything else becomes easier to do. The next thing about the prayer is that it's not so much about the quantity of prayer that you perform. Very often that, when you grow up as children, that, it's stressed that you have to do all of these things. And then it looks so burdensome, 17 rakat and counting for Isha and so on and so forth. But if you think about it, that the way prayer has been ordained and has been given to us by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is something that takes a very small portion of our time during the course of the day. It's sort of, it's at intervals, at opportune intervals for us to be able to reconnect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And once you begin to make time in your schedule for this, you would find things will become a lot easier, inshallah. And the more that you can read, the more that you can understand, the more that you can pour your heart out in your prayer, the easier it will become, inshallah. And the more that you can ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of the du'as that we've learned, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam has taught us, is Allahumma a'inni ala dhikrika wa shukrika wa husni ibadatik. That we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to aid us, to be able to help us. Allahumma a'inni ala dhikrika, to make remembrance of Allah. You think that you're making remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but the one who gave you the ability to make a remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself. You think that you're worshipping Allah, but Allah, you only got an opportunity to worship Him because He has given you that opportunity. So remembering the gifts of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and being thankful for it will make us realize that this prayer is something which is divinely ordained, something which is truly special, something which lends us the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and something that draws us towards Him, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair. We'll take one more question, and it's related to barakah in your earnings. If you do not declare your full earnings, does that mean there is no barakah in your earning?
I mean, ultimately, the way that we declare is not that there is no barakah in our earnings, but remember that when we think about barakah, I mean, in everything that we do, we try to do it to the best of our ability. And everything that we do may not be perfect. And everybody is starting from a different point, different starting point. We're not all at the same point in our journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's important to know where we're at. it could be that, that we feel that maybe the source of our income is not the best, but we still have to be able to earn an income. And it could be that we want to be able to work towards, making our income much more wholesome, and that might take time. But it's having that sense of realization that whatever it is that you want to do, you want to be able to try your best in whatever way that you can to be able to make sure that it's wholesome.
Jazakallah khair. I don't think there are any more questions, and we're exactly 5 minutes away from 6 o'clock. Jazakallah khair to everybody who has participated and answering your questions. Inshallah, Dr. Riza has answered most or all of your questions, alhamdulillah. I would like to personally thank Dr. Riza Muhammad on behalf of UK Islamic Mission for joining us today. It's been very insightful. This is such an important topic, and you've covered it in so beautifully in such a thought-provoking way. I think there's something here that we can all take away from it. Jazakallah khair to all the attendees for coming and joining us for this 1 hour. I'm sure that you will join me in thanking Dr. Riza Muhammad for joining us this evening. I hope you all stay safe, inshallah. I hope that you all are, of course, doing well in the best of health and Iman as well. Inshallah, we will see you again next week. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. Next Tuesday, we will be talking about Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahy anil Munkar, inshallah. And that will be at the same time from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. And inshallah, we hope to see you then. Once again, Jazakallah khair for you all to attend, and Jazakallah khair, Dr. Riza Muhammad, for giving us your time.
Jazakallah. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum.